energy and energy for all. Every community above 500 people in this country will be connected to the national electrification grid. And that is a promise that we make to the people of Ghana.
Thank you so much. Shall we now turn to Dr. Sakara Foster, please?
Thank you very much. The sad truth is that there are no quick fixes to solving energy problems because they depend fundamentally on medium to long-term planning. When Akosombo was built several decades ago, we only used 10% of that energy. We exported the rest, sat down, and waited and waited and waited. Even when V Dam was stopped and started, we still waited and waited and waited until we lost the opportunity to do the planning at the right time. And therefore, it catches up with you. So we would put in place not only a long to medium term plan to create more energy, but we will, as before, make sure that it is in surplus amount to keep us running for a significant time, and we won't have to deal with the issues of load shedding. You must always have a surplus of energy. You cannot work at an operating minimum. And that means anytime there's any small incident, you're having your lights off and industry is getting affected. So the idea that we carry only what we need, I think is itself the fallacy. We have to carry a surplus and we have to plan for that surplus. We will have that surplus through a diversification of sources. We will go to the biomass from our crop residue, especially that we get from plantation crops like sugarcane on a large hectarage, which can also add power to the national grid. We will go to biogas from many of the urban centers where we will convert our solid wastes and manage them to produce additional gas, which will be powered and put into the national grid. That means that you must make deliberate investments that will look at the benefits not just in energy, but also in cleaning our cities. Because when people know that there's money in rubbish, you no longer have problems with rubbish collection. We will look at the gas thermal energy, which my colleagues have enumerated. But I think there, our effort will be to make sure that there is investment in the use of gas in areas where the infrastructure allows the gas to be piped to homes. It is actually quite a scene to see very expensive residential areas with people driving out of very big cars only to go and join a gas queue somewhere. Sometimes they don't want to be seen, so they stop somewhere and send the boys to collect the gas.
Thank you very, very much. I want to thank all of you for taking your turns with this question. Could you please?
Gentlemen, I want us to talk about health briefly. And we will start with you, Nanado, on health. We'll ask a substantive question and perhaps some follow-up questions. In your own analysis, what are the top 3 challenges to quality healthcare delivery in Ghana today? And what will be your government's program to deal with them in a 4-year term? Nanado, we'll start with you, 3 minutes.
Very much, Kojo. The most important healthcare initiative that our country has seen has been the establishment of the National Health Insurance Scheme. It is a precious national asset, and we're watching that asset being undermined and demoralized. In September, the Minister of Health, Abin Bagban, told the country that the NHIS faced a precarious future because it is now running in deficit. And unless a solution was found to it, the whole future and stability of the scheme was under threat. What he forgot to say was that the NPP left the National Health Insurance Scheme as an institution in surplus. Over 300 million cedis was left in the NHIS fund to continue its expansion and its development. Today, the NHIS is in deficit of monies close to the 300 million that were in surplus. So the first thing is the measures that will make sure that the NHIS continues to live. We will stop the use of NHIS funds to fund other activities of government, which has become a feature of the management of the NHIS in the NDC era. The NHIS funds are there for the development of the NHIS. That's the first thing. Secondly, we will restore confidence in the system. That confidence has been seriously battered these last 3 or 4 years by people who don't seem to have any particularly good attitude towards the scheme. We know the MPs walked out of Parliament, including Mr. President, and he was then a member of Parliament when the law was being debated. And that therefore there's always been some hesitation on their part to embrace the merits of the scheme. We want to revive it and make sure that it is spread. Membership in the NHIS is declining. The renewal of membership in the NHIS is declining. The active membership has gone down from over 9 million to just over 8 million. The renewal rates are all down. All of these are a sign of the lack of confidence in the system, part of which was generated by what is now turned out to be the biggest political hoax in our history, the promise of the one-time premium. The one-time premium has turned out to be illusory, pie in the sky. It is no longer even part of the NDC manifesto going forward for 2012.
Thank you. Nana, I was looking for 3. You've given me 1, NHIS. I want to ask you about another that you didn't mention. Access to healthcare, infrastructure, and personnel. You have any plan to deal with that?
Those are all matters that the NHIS, in fact, is doing. You know the number of district hospitals and hospitals that were built in the NHIS. If we continue the expansion of the system and the confidence that the system is generating amongst our people, the funds will come into the system that will allow that expansion of access and infrastructure to take place. But at the end of the day, you have a national health insurance scheme. It has to be the pivot around which you plan the health responses of the society. And that's why I took the revival of the NHIS as the most critical single need that we want to do. Access, the training of our doctors, the training of more health workers, all of those are part and parcel of the process of assuring our nation and a healthcare system that is both affordable and accessible.
Mr. President, let me come to you. The top 3 challenges to healthcare delivery and how you plan to deal with them in a 4-year term.
Let me just comment on this NHIS business before I give you the top 3. Nana has kept going at the NHIS and they've kept rebutting. I don't know why he keeps doing this. The NHIS has grown phenomenally since the NDC came into office. From 9 million visitations, that's utilization, it's gone to 25 million. From 180 million cedis claims payment, it's gone to 550 million Ghana cedis claims payment. This is not an NHIS that is shrinking. This is an NHIS that is expanding. And they've responded and giving him the facts, but he persists in creating an impression that the NHIS is dead or is dying. It isn't dying. It's not going to die under my watch, and it's a pledge I give to Ghanaians. But the 3 top issues that we need to deal with are 1, access; 2, human resource, provision of adequate health personnel; and then 3, affordability, which is the issue addressed by NHIS, by insurance premiums. Access, we have invested heavily in the health sector. We have invested in district hospitals, we've built polyclinics across the country, and we continue to expand access. And that is why more people under the NHIS are having access to health care. In terms of training of human resource, we are building nurses and midwives schools across the country. You can tell in the last 4 years how many of these nurses and midwifery schools have been opened. We have opened health assistance training schools across the country to provide more health assistance for the health infrastructure. We have invested in the Tamale Teaching Hospital, which I'm supposed to commission. I'm looking for a date to go and do so. We're going to build the Wa Regional Hospital. The Bolga Hospital is about to take off. And in our manifesto, we have even indicated that we'll build a regional hospital in Nanes region, the eastern region, so that every hospital has a regional hospital that provides the level of care that our people need. And so that investment in health infrastructure is important. You can have the most beautiful NHIS scheme. If you don't have the health infrastructure, then it means that people don't have access. And if you don't train the personnel to be able to man those centers, then the infrastructure is useless. And so in addition to the health personnel we're training locally, we have sent out 250 of our children to train in Cuba and come back as doctors, as x-ray technicians, as different specialists in the health industry. And those children will come back and come and work in the areas where we selected them from. We took them from the underserved areas of this country. And so our expectation is that when they come back, they'll go back to their areas of origin and go and give service there.
Okay, a quick follow-up question. And under human resource, what is your program to ensure that the quality of healthcare that people get when they visit a health facility is significantly improved, at least in a 4-year tenure?
Kojo, there is a correlation between the quality of human resource in terms of training and also the equipment and infrastructure to be able to deliver. And so the nurses and midwifery training colleges that we are putting out are training more nurses and midwives to come out into the system. The new university we put in Volta region in Ho is called the University of Health and Allied Sciences, and it's going to produce a lot of the paramedics for the health sector. The University of Development Studies Medical School is going to churn out more doctors to come into the system. But you must provide the infrastructure and the equipment so that they are able to deliver the kind of quality health care that our people deserve. And that's what we're doing. There are two things that are interlinked. You cannot separate, and we're doing both of them jointly, and they're running concurrently. And I'm sure that as we do that, we're reducing maternal mortality, the number of women who die when giving birth, which is their biological function. We're reducing the number of children who die from preventable diseases. And this is an obligation as president I'll continue to do.
Thank you. Dr. Sakara.
Thank you very much. The CPP understands very well that health is premised on access to clean drinking water, sanitation, and medical care. It is therefore a multi-sectoral approach that is needed to break the huge infrastructure deficit. And we will do this in 3 areas: to address the issue of prevention in the first place, secondly, to address the issue of access, and then to address the issue of adequacy of health care. Now, the first thing we will do is to establish an infrastructure financing authority that will be able to source funds from municipal level, national level, and international level to create bonds to fund that huge infrastructure deficit. We cannot fund that huge infrastructure deficit through incremental allocations under the existing system without creating a huge source of funding, because the numbers are running away faster than we are achieving them. And this is why we're clearly behind in the MDG goals. It is like standing on a conveyor belt. The moment you get tired, you start going back. So we must get in our minds that we have to have a huge source of funding to break the infrastructure deficit. Now, in the area of prevention, which is linked to our water and sanitation, it is clear that in addition to providing water and sanitation, we have to look at urban renewal, even in our most highly dense areas. Because you go to Nima and try putting a pipe-borne water there and see how many solid wastes you will have to pass to get to somebody's house. We have to have a serious urban renewal that uses the vertical space to create room for adequate water and also health care. sanitation in those areas. So it is interlinked. The second issue is the issue of manpower. At the last count, we had slightly over 5,000 trained doctors. Surprise, surprise. 2,000 of these are in Accra, the other 2,000 are in Kumasi, and we share the rest of the 1,000 for the whole country. So we have to do something significant. It is not just a matter of incremental touches here and there. We must have a strong training program to create more doctors and to reduce the maternal mortality and infant mortality. We have to strengthen the training of midwives and the availability of midwives at the CHIPS compounds. But in addition to that, put in place small infrastructure that will allow their transportation between points.
Mr. Yaga?
The three most important parts of the challenges of quality healthcare, we are looking at assessing the healthcare system. That is to talk about National Health Insurance Scheme and involving the family planning use, the use of contraceptives to be able to educate our people on how to be able to.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we have some silence in the auditorium, please? Can we have some silence in the auditorium? We'll start the counter from 3 minutes from the top. Can we have some silence, please? Yes, Mr. Jariga, you may start.
The use of contraceptives, I believe that will help control our family planning. It is important, first of all, to be able to control the system so that we do not produce a lot in the system. Secondly, we will look at training of doctors, midwives, nurses, medical practitioners, and labor attendants. Thirdly, we'll look at more ultra-modern equipment that will be able to use at the hospitals. Today, you realize that when there are many operations, we are not able to access enough energy to start an operation. So it becomes very difficult for people to carry out operations. So we are looking at equipping the hospitals with ultra-modern facilities and equipment so that once you are in the process of an operation, the lights goes off, immediately the generator takes off and we don't lose lives. Thirdly, we look at sanitation. The issue of prevention is better than cure is the most priority of health. Let's prevent being sick. Let's prevent cholera. Let's prevent open gutters. You realize that when you go to places like Nima and other places, we have so much open gutters around the area. These are issues that cause our health to deteriorate. So we believe that in assessing healthcare and promoting quality healthcare, let's tackle the issues first. Prevention is better than cure. So we will accept that one as another part. The another part of it is the private-public healthcare centers. We will need to put up healthcare centers across the nation. Many people do not get access to healthcare, even though they live around the hospitals or maybe towns. So what we need to do is to make sure that many healthcare centers are built across the country so that people in villages are easily transported to the healthcare center. So we will need another process of assessing mobility. We will need ambulances in all the healthcare centers so that once there's an ambulance and somebody is dying somewhere, we will have a code, a telephone code in which you just need to dial on your mobile phone, a free toll code, and then the ambulance is right at your door or at the vicinity in which you will need to be. Other part of it is assessing, training many doctors who will remain in Ghana. At most of the times, you realize that we have many doctors who leave this country after training them. We will encourage their salaries. We will encourage the salaries of midwives. We will encourage salaries of nurses so that they remain in the system to help solve the problem of healthcare. Many a times they do not even get incentives. So we will adopt a process where incentives and taxes are given for them to be able to access healthcare. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yaga, and thank you very much, all the candidates. Nado has a rebuttal. I'll give you a rebuttal for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Kojo. The president is saying that I keep on going on matters already on which I should be better educated. The reason why I'm going on is that the facts that he has contradict the real facts on the ground. There's been a 21% decrease in membership of the NHIS in the last 3 years. Fact number one. Fact number two, a threefold increase in visitations by people to the hospitals suggests rather that people are getting sicker, not that they're getting better. You're not sick, you don't go to the hospital. If in the Kufuor era, the ratio between those who were in the scheme and how many times they visited hospital was 1-to-1. Today it's 3-to-1. That's an indication that far from the health situation in our country improving, it's getting worse. Thirdly, the president referred to this Cuban initiative, which he led. The amounts of monies means that 105,000 CVs are being spent on the training of one doctor in the Cuban arrangement. We're told by the Ghana Medical Association that they can train, a doctor is trained in Ghana for 30,000 CVs. So the initiative, far from accelerating the delivery of medical care for our people, in fact, is contracting it. We would have used that money much better in empowering the medical institutions in our country to deliver and produce more doctors. Thirdly, Wa Hospital, which is one of the hospitals allegedly being developed, was visited by Muhammadu Bawumia the other day, and it found out that it was just an empty piece of land. There was nothing there, with a big, big title. I wonder what the Alliance University in Ho, what infrastructure there is there.
Okay.
Virtually nothing.
Okay, so those 2 minutes are up, and Nanado, that's your final rebuttal for the night. We thank you. Prof will ask the very final question for this round, and then we'll go for a final break. Mr. President, you want a rebuttal? Do I see your... Yes, you want a rebuttal. This will be your final as well.
I'm reluctant to use this rebuttal, but I need to set the record straight. The cost of training one child under the Cuban program is $5,000, far lower than the cost of training in our medical school here. And so we had to take that opportunity. I wanted to set that record straight. And so it's not the figure you have. You've kept conjuring pie in the sky figures that do not reflect the reality.
These are figures that are published on the internet and everywhere by your own
Thank you very
statements.
much. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I move to the final question in this round. And distinguished audience, I need your support once again so that we can listen to our candidates. That is why we are here. We are here to listen to them. Shall we minimize our own conversations, please? Shall we have more silence in this room? Thank you very much. Final question. And I begin with the president, who is also the presidential candidate for the NDC. It appears that as a nation, we are increasingly dependent on debt financing of our development agenda. Now the question, how would your government manage the nation's debt? Presidential candidate for NDC.
Well, the use of debt financing or to finance infrastructure is one strategy that has been used by all countries that have achieved middle income status and that aspire to achieve developed nation status. You do not at any one time have all the resources present that you can use to roll out infrastructure, to roll out social services for your people. And so countries take on debt. Even developed countries take on debt in order to finance their expenditure programs. The important thing is not about the quantum of debt in terms of nominal terms, but the important thing is about your debt sustainability. And we have continued to monitor our debt sustainability to ensure that we keep it within the levels that are manageable. Ghana's public debt, total, domestic and foreign, comes to $14 billion. And as a percentage of our GDP, it currently amounts to 44% of GDP. The recommended level of debt to GDP ratio is 60%. If you look at some of the countries that are in trouble in the EU currently, their debt to GDP ratio went as high as 145% of GDP. Greece has managed to bring that down to about 120% of GDP, because of the various bailouts it has got, and is hoping to bring that down further. Ghana's debt level is within proportion. The important thing to also note is, what do you do with that debt that you borrow? You must invest it in the productive sectors so that, one, it accelerates your economic growth, and two, it provides jobs for your people. And that is exactly what we've been doing. The current China Development Bank facility, of which Nana has been a very strong opponent, is going into the productive sectors of the economy. We're using it to expand the ports in order that more ships can come into the harbors. We're using it to rehabilitate the railways, to replace the rails that people took and sold and let the trains start moving it again. We're using it to provide fish landing sites at all the fishing communities. We're using it to build a port terminal, inland terminal at Buipe, so that Burkina Faso and Niger can take their goods from there. We're using it to build a bus terminal so that we can store more gas to be able to supply the people. The money is going into the productive sectors. Every money we have taken is indicated against particular projects, and you can check those projects and find out what essence they have for economic development. We believe our debt sustainability is in good hands, and as president, I'm going to continue to ensure that that happens.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sakara, please.
Debt financing is a normal phenomenon. All countries borrow. The question is, what do you use it for? And does what you use it for have a sufficiently high rate of return for you not to accumulate interest and create more debt? That is the question. And when you look at our portfolio of investments, you look for the areas where there is a high rate of return. And the declining agriculture is crying for that investment to transform the agriculture and to create productivity that is really unprecedented, because agriculture can provide you a high rate of return very quickly, 1-2 seasons, and you're in, if you invest in it the right way. But when we direct those investments to medium and long term, and we have no way of even balancing our books, let alone to repay those interests, then you accumulate debt. So we would go for strategic investments that generate a high rate of return for use of those debt loans in order to be able to repay the debts within those loans. We will compartmentalize it. We will not cross-subsidize. In other words, if we take a loan for a particular project, we will make sure it is used for that and calculate the rate of return to ensure that it can be paid, rather than cross-subsidize it from our general budget. I think that is one of the problems that we have been having. So each project will be compartmentalized and will ensure a high rate of return, and agriculture will get a high priority. One of the things that we should know is that when you invest in agriculture, together with our fertilizer and our rail system and our water, you get a synergy that you do not see. Each of those projects will give you a rate of return, but cumulatively, they will have a synergy that can be so great that it will cover your debt repayments quickly. These are the high priority areas that we need to address, and they will generate enough money to pay for our services. The other issue, since I've got 33 seconds left on the debt financing, is really to talk about the issue of growth and changing the structure of the economy. Debts keep you pinned to the wall. They do not allow you to breathe. So if you do not invest them in a way which creates wealth and gives you space to breathe, many of the things you want to do, you eventually find you cannot do them, and therefore you accumulate debt.
Thank you for exhausting all your time. Now, PNC, Ms. Ayariga, please.
We have two types of debt. We have internal and external. From my statistics from 1990, we had 62.5% of our gross domestic product. Today, it is 44.3%, like the president mentioned. We believe that if we want to finance our debt, we will have to channel it into public-private sector. The public-private sector, once access financing, they are able to create many jobs for our people. They are able to give us guarantee of our industrialization and manufacturing companies. We believe that we should invest in education rather than talking about the free education. If we use those debts to channel it into education, it will give us competent and dedicated young graduates who will then come out to be able to help the economy grow and strengthen our self-reliance. We will also invest in agriculture. Agriculture needs a lot of investments. For instance, we will have to help give farmers with input supplies, chemicals, and other issues that they will need to go on with their farming activities. Healthcare it's an issue that we have today. We have been talking about building hospitals, building many other clinics across the country. This will need the financing of government. So government should actually relate into the necessity of life. That is to talk about healthcare, agriculture, education, water, and sanitation. So if we are able to channel many of our resources to be able to give of life to our people, we will not be building castles in the air and promising what we cannot do, but rather we promise what we can be able to do. We will also invest in housing. As you know, housing is a very serious problem in this country, and many of our people do not get access to housing. So we will use much of our finances and our debt collector to put up many, many high-rising buildings that will accommodate the people who do not get access to housing, so that at least the many, many lands we have been outdooring and throwing out of system, because every individual man wants to have a house. But if we are able to put up high-rising buildings where 200 people can occupy one land, I think it will help us more than everybody trying to acquire one piece of land to build. Because we need lands to be able to farm, and we need lands to be able to do agriculture. So let's preserve the land by investing in housing, so that Ghana will at least,
Please go on.
We will also
continue.
invest in ICT, information communication technology. Believe me, it is very important in the system. Today, we do not have technological trained young men. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much. I appreciated your response. Colleagues, please let us give our candidates the chance to speak with us. That is why we are here, I believe. Please, with all respect. Thank you very much. NPP presidential candidate.
Great, and once again, thank you so much. I think that the most effective way that we can have a debt portfolio for our country that is sustainable is to make sure that the NDC loses this election in December. Kicking out the NDC will be the surest way we can to protect the debt structure of our country. Why do I say that? In the 4 years in which they have been in power, they have more than tripled our national debt, from 9 billion cedis, which was at the end of Kufuor's period, to 28 billion cedis today. In the 4 years of the NDC administration, they have contracted more debt than all the governments of our country, from Kwame Nkrumah right down to John Agyekum Kufuor. That is the nature of the situation confronting our country. And I dare say the president would agree with me that without the rebasing of the economy, the debt profile of our country today will be getting towards epic proportions. So we need, when we're talking about the debt profile of our country, to bear in mind two things. One, the areas into which the debt goes. And I agree with some of my previous speakers that the productive investment and the rate of return on them is a critical one. Equally critical is the value for money of the transactions that the debt brings about. We need to look at that. I've given some examples of public procurements that are taking place in our country on an extremely inflated rate. Once again, we need to look at this. You're talking about loans that are given, and inside the loans, the arrangements for determining value for money remain very opaque and unclear. How can you persuade the Ghanaian people that debts are being contracted in these circumstances that are there to push forward their future? We intend to be extremely disciplined about the contraction of debt. We're first of all going to respect the teachings of the national budget and treat it as precious. We will not be stepping outside the constraints of the budget. We are going to make sure that we reduce considerably areas of corruption in the construction and the execution of some of these projects. These are the critical matters that our people are looking for leadership on. That we are not going to get ourselves in airline and other aircraft and other transactions that leave so many questions to be answered. The 28 billion is even without the latest Chinese debt.
Thank you so much.
These are
thank you very
unsustainable
much.
matters.
Yes, thank you. And thank all of you very, very much for cooperating with us. We have come to the end of our second cycle. We'll give ourselves 5 minutes only. Only 2 persons per political party may go to their candidates. The parties may decide whom. The rest of us may wish to sit for the 5 minutes. Thank you very much. 5 minutes only, and we return.
Moderators for tonight's debate, Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman and Mr. Kojo Oponkroma.
Thank you very much, Samuel. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first of the IEA 2012 presidential debates live from the Radash Hall in Tamale. Gentlemen, for this final segment, we have got only 4 questions, and we'll focus on private sector and industrialization. We'll start with you, Mr. Hassan Ayariga. Can we have some silence in the auditorium, please? Silence in the auditorium, please. Thank you. Mr. Ayaga, we'll start counting now from 3 minutes from now. And here's the question. What will be the private sector development strategy of the government that you hope to lead in January 2013?
Come again, please.
What will be the private sector development strategy of the government that you hope to lead come January 2013?
The private sector is the engine of growth and development. When given the necessary support and financing, it will grow. So we will look at small-scale private sector and the large-scale, medium-scale sector. Industrialization is one aspect of growth. The Ghanaian industries have collapsed over the years due to lack of raw materials and due to global challenges and market issues, guaranteed market. When you look at the situation today, our companies are not being able to compete with foreign companies because of the market system. Chinese have taken over the market, producing at a very low cost and bringing it into Ghana and spoiling the nation with inferior goods. What we will do is that we will boost and help the economy and help the private sector by giving them loan facilities. We will provide them with facilities and equipments that will help them boost the private sector. We will make sure that our industries that have collapsed, we will revive them and give them support to be able to continue to produce and then use our raw materials to make finished goods. You realize that Ghanaian companies have one problem. It is the financing that is the issue. The market and the financing is one aspect that is failing us. We do not have working capital like Ahmed mentioned. The companies start very nicely, but at the end of the day, they fall because they do not get additional support to be able to continue with their manufacturing and their businesses. So what we will do is that we'll give loans to the small-scale businessmen We will also provide them with incentives and technical know-how so that they are able to compete in the market and produce at a very low cost so that they are able to sell out of the global world. When you look at Ghana, we have rubber. But if we were able to concentrate in the rubber industry alone and support the cost of the rubber factory, we will be able to build many factories in Ghana and create more jobs. We also have leather. Assuming we are able to enter into contract with Toyota Ghana Limited or even Toyota company in the whole country and the whole world, and we are to produce just seats, car seats for Toyota, and we concentrate only on manufacturing car seats, the whole world that Toyota has been giving Ghana the contract to produce.
Yes, Mr. Ayaga, thank you for your submissions. Let me go to Nanado. In 3 minutes, please tell us your strategy. Silence in the auditorium, please.
Kojo, thank you. It's a big subject for 3 minutes, but anyway, let's see what we can do. There's absolutely no doubt in the minds of anybody in this country that if there's a party which is unashamedly in favor of private sector operation, in favor of the market, it is the New Patriotic Party. We've been singing the song of a market-led, private sector-led development of our country from the very beginning of our independence. So what do we need to do? What is the picture that we see today? The Ghanaian private sector is dominated by foreign-owned companies, essentially. Of the 15 leading companies in our country, 13 of them are all foreign-owned. There shows the weakness of our private sector development. I think that the measures that we need to take in terms of opening up capital for the development of our private sector is absolutely key. That's why we intend to propose the establishment of a bank for industry, which is going to reorganize the various funds that are in place today, the new EDF, the venture capital fund, and others, into the bank for industry to allow that bank the opportunity to assess banks at competitive rates of interest to enterprises at competitive rates of interest to be able to boost the manufacturing and industrial development of our country. It is absolutely key in our view of the transformation agenda that we put the resources behind our companies that are attempting to manufacture things for ourselves as against always being dependent on foreign imports for our goods. So that's one area. The second, of course, is also making it possible for private sector operators to have access to technology, whether appropriate or the latest, to enable them also to be better positioned. I'll give you one example. The pharmaceutical industry of our country is an industry that can yield great dividends for our country if we give it the necessary support. Some of the measures that are being taken, facility fees that have gone up from $7,000 to $15,000, they don't help. We need the targeting, making sure that we provide the wherewithal for the pharmaceutical industry to take off in our country. Thirdly, bringing the informal sector into the formal world is a critical matter because most of our small and medium-scale enterprises are in the informal sector. And when we formalize their activities, it gives us the opportunity to provide the needed boost for them to be able to take up the slack of development. So there are several measures that we need to take. But the focus on ensuring and empowering the private sector is central to our strategy for development.
Thank you very much. Let me go to the President in 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Kojo. The private sector development strategy is driven by our private sector development strategy phase 2, which we launched a few years ago and was formalized when I inaugurated the Private Sector Development Council, of which I'm the chair. Now, the thrust of our policy would be to reduce the cost of doing business in Ghana in order that our private sector can thrive. And so we must make energy affordable, available to them at affordable prices, reduce the general costs in terms of transport charges and other charges that make business expensive here in Ghana. We should also look at the availability of affordable financing for them going forward. And we've already started the process of doing this. We've sent legislation to Parliament to change the Export Development and Investment Fund to the Export Development and Agricultural Investment Fund, so that the agricultural sector and agro-processing can also benefit from the EDIF fund. We also have talked about stimulus packages for the private sector, so that we are able to provide them with the kind of investment they need to expand their production and be able to create more jobs for our people. We would expand the venture capital so that it would continue to be able to provide venture capital for startup businesses. And also, like I said, we're putting up 10 million Ghana cedi seed capital for the Job Enterprises Development Fund, which is supposed to finance the Young Entrepreneurs Fund. That is young people who want to go into business of their own at the SME level. We'll be giving the startup capital, we'll be giving the technical training, we'll be giving the mentorship so that they're able to grow their business. And as their businesses grow and they're able to stand on their own, they'll be graduated out of the scheme and new people put into the scheme. So these are all packages that we have. One of the things we're going to do is to spread the local content law across the sectors. And so not only for the oil and gas industry, but also for the other industries, construction and other such industries, the private sector in Ghana should be given a role to play in terms of local content. And so a certain percentage of work in those areas will be reserved for Ghanaian private sector. Aside from that, we must use the procurement muscle of government to promote the Ghanaian private sector. Government is the biggest spender in this economy, and we can use government budgets to ensure that procurement is derived from the private sector. We must also spread out infrastructure so that the private sector can spread out across the country, create